Today I just wanted to share a short video to show you just how helpful it can be in many cases to work with a practitioner that really understands what causes various health problems. And I know that many of you have trouble in this regard. You've probably been to several different practitioners trying to find out what's wrong with you. And I'm not saying that it's always this simple. Usually it's not always this simple, but I wanted to share this case where we were able to find the culprit, the main culprit of this person's health problems by doing one test, and that is the hair tissue mineral analysis, the test that I offer in my practice. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here just to show you the test. And so this is a 34-year-old male who didn't have many health complaints. He was a busy person. He had multiple businesses. And his main complaint was that he had dry, itchy skin, especially around his mouth. And he's also had itchy earlobes and frequent urination. But his main concern was this dry, flaky skin on his face. And so when we did a hair analysis, there are multiple imbalances here, but the most notable is this elevated copper level. And a copper imbalance, in my view, is often associated with skin problems. And that is usually due to copper's involvement in collagen synthesis. And so any type of connective tissue disorder or collagen disorder can have to do with a copper imbalance. Normally on the test, we'll find low levels of copper, and this tends to indicate that copper is biounavailable. So there may be excess copper in the body, in the liver and the brain especially, but copper transport proteins or some other imbalance is causing copper to be biounavailable, and therefore it's not doing its job efficiently or sufficiently. But in this case, there was a high level of copper, and that led me to believe that there was some type of exposure going on. And of course, the first thing we thought of was the water. So we were planning to have this guy, test his water. He was getting well water. It could be contaminated in some way. More often, the case is that the water is leaching copper from copper piping, which is common in many households. So that was our initial thought. But the thing was that he had this dry, itchy skin for about 5 years. And the house that he was living in, he was only living there for about a year or so. So that doesn't really correlate with the water source being the problem. Now, he could have had the same problem in his previous dwelling, which is very possible because, like I said, copper piping is pretty common in certain areas of the country. But the fact that he's been dealing with this for 4 or 5 years had me suspecting a different cause. But I tried to explain some of the other sources of copper, but nothing really resonated. And as I was talking with him, setting him up on a program and going over the report that I sent him, he was looking at the warnings section, and one of them stated things about dental procedures and dental materials. And all of a sudden, it kind of clicked for him. He said, you know what? I have this permanent retainer in my mouth, and I think it's copper. And I was like, well, there you go. You're absorbing a ton of copper from that retainer that's been in his mouth for about 15 years. And as we were talking, I looked up, he wasn't really sure if it was copper. He said, it looks like copper. So I looked up what permanent retainers are usually made of, and sure enough, it was copper. So this person's symptoms, the dry, flaky skin, is essentially coming from the copper being eliminated through the body or interfering with some part of the skin integrity. I think it's most likely just being eliminated through the skin. And isn't it interesting that The area of his face where his skin is dry and flaky is right around the mouth where that retainer is. So now he's going to have the retainer removed, and that's going to eliminate this source of excess copper, which I think is going to clear things up quite a bit, especially in the long run. When you remove metal objects from the body initially, and this includes things like the copper IUD, which causes a similar situation with this, except that usually women who are affected by the copper IUD have much more serious health problems. The copper IUD can ruin a woman's health. But once you remove one of these metal devices from your body, whether it's this metal retainer, a copper IUD, or even mercury fillings, there's often a period of initial relief when that exposure is removed, followed by a lot of detoxification. And this can cause symptoms to flare up. And it may be even symptoms that the person wasn't currently experiencing. And the reason this occurs is because when you remove the device, you're removing the exposure. And so now the body doesn't have to deal with that constant exposure, and it's going to start dumping or eliminating the metal that has been accumulating in the body tissues. So this person, even if he removes the permanent retainer, he's going to start detoxing, because this 15-year exposure to copper, it's not just coming out in the hair, it's not just coming out in the skin, it's been stored in the body, most likely. So now the body has to release all that stored copper. So this person's problems aren't necessarily done once he has that retainer removed. And also, this long-term exposure to this copper has caused metabolic changes and metabolic problems. So this person's going to have to go through a period of biochemical rebuilding and balancing. So you can see some of these other imbalances on the test. He's got a slow metabolic rate. He's got the low sodium and potassium levels plus a low sodium to potassium ratio. And so the excess copper was a major stress on the body, in addition to probably other problems. This person eats relatively well, but there are probably other stressors that have combined to create this metabolic picture. But I'm glad we were able to find the main culprit so that we can remove that stress, start the healing and detoxification process, and get this person's health back on track. And so sometimes it can be this simple. There's one main exposure that's probably causing a lot of the problems, but other times it's much more of a combination of factors, prolonged stress that leads to exhaustion of the body and depletion of the body, combined with an accumulation of various toxins. And that whole process needs to be unraveled over a longer period of time. If you want to do your own hair analysis to uncover what might be causing your particular health problems, then go to brzezinskinutrition.com/HTMA to learn more.